Good evening. It is Monday night, and we are live on the State of Scottish Football. There's Scottish Cup weekend, and Struan joins me. We've got a lot to pick through from the Scottish Cup this weekend.
Plenty to pick out. It was a really good weekend actually for the Scottish Cup. A few upsets in there as well, and a few injuries as well, and plenty of transfer news to get through.
Yeah, the magic of the Cup continues in Scotland, and no better place to start than Kelty Hearts as they stunned St Johnstone. Was it a shock for you that Kelty won that game, or given St Johnstone's recent run of poor form, was that result maybe to be expected?
I think it was probably the upset of the round. Obviously, a League Two side beating a Premiership side, but at the same time, I'm not that stunned by it. I mean, I think St Johnstone came into it on the back of 9 straight defeats or something of that manner. You know, the form they've been in compared to Kelty Hearts is opposite ends of the spectrum there. How well the two of them have gotten on, and I feel I'm not actually that surprised, to be honest. It's just crazy though, isn't it? St Johnstone, obviously double cup winners last season, out of the Scottish Cup by January this season. You know, yeah. I saw a brilliant stat on Twitter earlier on that said St Johnstone are probably the only team in football history to draw with Galatasaray and then lose to Kelty Hearts in the same season. You know, it is ridiculous, and it's led to all sorts of questions about the team, the players. I know Jason Kerr and Ali McCann. We always knew that their departures were going to leave a massive hole in that St Johnstone side, but I don't think people realised just how big an influence they had on that team. You know, Cam Davidson, I think the Herald were reporting it yesterday, saying he knows that his job is potentially under pressure now as well. I think talks came out today, though, that said he still has the backing, but it's one of those situations now. I'm sure we'll get onto the next fixture later on, but it's a really, really difficult position right now to be a St Johnstone fan, and given not even 12 months after the heroics of last season, it's just a crazy situation that St Johnstone find themselves in. But all credit to Kelty Hearts, obviously a fantastic result for them and deservedly going through to the next round.
Yeah, I think when you look at to mention Galatasaray, as you alluded to see how they started the season, the performance they put in, especially away from home against Galatasaray, against Linsk as well, the Austrian side in Europe. I didn't think we would be speaking about St Johnstone in this position come the end of January, and what a meek defence of their Scottish Cup. But, you know, when you're looking to cause an upset, you have to have everybody in your team stepping up to the plate, and it's fair to say Kelty had that from the keeper to the front line, because their keeper had to pull off a couple of great saves in that first half. Ali Crawford denied from distance, and Chris Kane had a header flicked towards the bottom corner that the keeper expertly tipped round the post. So, you know, it wasn't like St Johnstone went out for the want of trying. Kelty, maybe if you want to say, rode their luck at times, but look, in cup competition, you've got to have that bit of luck, and Kelty got it. And, you know, hats off to Kevin Thompson and his side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kevin Thompson recently has been admitted that he was interviewed with the Kilmarnock job and other things like that, and I think you can totally understand why. What Kelty have done this season has been absolutely fantastic. Obviously, coming in with the change of manager, with Barry Ferguson going away to an Athletic and Kevin Thompson coming in, it was a bit of uncertainty, but they've been absolutely fantastic. And again, as I said at the start of it, it wasn't too big of a shock that they beat St Johnstone. And I think that's more praising Kelty Hearts than it is slagging off St Johnstone, because although the Saints' form has been poor, Kelty have been so good, and you think that they could easily pull off an upset. And it's St Mirren, isn't it, that they've got in the next?
Yes, it is,
yeah, and I think a lot of people would probably back them. I know obviously St Mirren will be the favourites coming into that, and they should be 3 leagues above. But at the same time, if Kelty Hearts can pull off another result, I don't think people will be that shocked by it. They've been absolutely fantastic, and it would be great to see them keep advancing into this. I know a lot of people, when the draw was happening, wanted them to see Hearts, me included. I thought that would have been a great wee tie to have. But yeah, they might get them in the next round if they can get past St Mirren, and I think they really deserve it. I think a lot of the attention, and quite rightly so, has been on St Johnstone and Callum Davidson. Obviously, the way that this season has panned out for them. You know, you were talking there about the European results at the start of the season. I remember when I made my prediction for the league table, and I thought St Johnstone will push the top half. I wonder if they'll get European football, you know, kicking on from last season, and now it looks as if, you know, they're going to be going into the Championship. It's a crazy turn of events.
And I know when, you know, me and you've been doing this in maybe October, November, we kept saying St Johnstone are perennial slow starters. They'll come good. They'll come good. But, you know, we're in a week away from February, a week away from the transfer window closing. They've got to come good sooner rather than later, because, as you allude to, they are maybe staring at the Championship, that themselves and Dundee are beginning to get caught adrift at the bottom of the table. And when you are struggling in the league, a cup competition maybe often provides a bit of distraction, a bit of something to look forward to, the fans, but they don't even have that anymore. So now all focus for St Johnstone will be on that fight to survive. And do you think that St Johnstone will need to dip further into that transfer market?
I think so. I think, we spoke about the impact that some of these losses have had. Obviously, Kerr, the captain, Ali McCann, the best player. I think they've made some good signings, but even prior to this season starting, I feel like they needed more. I think everybody's noticed that St Johnstone don't score goals that frequently. They really needed a striker, and they've not really done that. Obviously, Shifty's come in, and I think we don't know what kind of Shifty they're going to get, if he's going to be the Dundee one or if it's going to be the Celtic one or whatever kind of performance he's going to have. I think he could be good. But at the same time, I think they need more reinforcements. I think their midfield is it's been poor. Obviously, losing somebody like Ali McCann is massive. The whole situation with Xander Clark as well looks as if he is going to be staying for this season. But I think his contract expires in the summer as well. So that's potentially an area that they'll need to look at, whether it's bringing in another goalkeeper now to sort of ease that or whether it is just waiting until the summer occurs. It's a really difficult situation. And I think the board have got a really tricky decision on their hands, because do they want to spend more money on Callum Davidson, or do they look at potentially appointing another manager to come in and choose to back them? Obviously, though, it's going to be too late by the time if they are to sack Callum Davidson and bring somebody else in. So it's a really difficult decision. And as you say, they are normally slow starters to the league, but if they're going to begin by the time they're relegated, it's pointless. It's a really difficult situation. And I feel the January transfer window is there for a reason. It's to help teams who are struggling. And, recalling the likes of Cam Hendry and obviously, as I said, Brian Shifty, they've done some business there, but you just look at the form and the way they're playing. I just don't think it's going to be enough, especially when we'll talk about it later. Dundee strengthening their side in a few manners of ways. Ross County have obviously picked up form, and Livingston have picked up form. It looks like if St Johnstone don't act quickly, they could be left behind here.
Yeah, and I think that's key. If they don't pick up, they're going to be left behind, as we're kind of alluded to, that they are being cut adrift slightly. I know there's a long way to go in the season, but the bigger the gap, the more pressure that immediately becomes onto St Johnstone. And I think the danger, you're speaking about will they or won't they spend, is if they throw a lot of money at it and it goes wrong, they leave themselves in a perilous position going down, probably having to offload players. St Johnstone, with all due respect, aren't exactly renowned for having the biggest of crowds, and the financial implications that will come if the worst case scenario develops. You kind of look at that just now in the Championship. Kilmarnock seem to be throwing everything at getting promotion, and it's kind of a catch-22. If they don't get promoted, is that at the financial risk of backing? But speaking of Kilmarnock and St Johnstone, you alluded to there earlier, Struan, Callum Hendry has come back from his loan spell at Kilmarnock to further bolster St Johnstone's attacking options. Just the 5 goals in his time at Rugby Park. He didn't exactly set the heather on fire when he was at Aberdeen last season. If you're a St Johnstone fan, does this ignite the passion that he's going to solve your goal-scoring problems?
I think what this said to me was that St Johnstone are not going to sign another striker if they are going to do any business in this window. I think that was they're doing what they can and bringing Hendry back. And I guess it's maybe needs must. If this is the only option they have, they possibly need to take it. I don't think Kelly will be too fussed. Obviously Ollie Shaw, I think, scores a penalty every single weekend, so they'll have goals coming from somewhere. But it's a really difficult decision. And I've just remembered there, I was saying about Xander Clark's contract expiring. I think Jamie McCart's contract expires in the summer as well. And I think he'll be snapped up by one of the top end teams in the Premiership as well, or potentially a Championship team in England. So I think I think he's got an easy route out of the club if he needs to be in the summer. So it's a really difficult situation. I don't know. I kind of want to jinx it in a way and say Callum Hendry won't score many and he'll all of a sudden save them. But I honestly can't see him scoring more than 5 goals. You mentioned there it's what he's got at Kelly. I don't think he's going to get many more than that, because I just feel the team as a whole are struggling, and I don't think he's going to be the difference. As I said earlier, I think Shifty could be that key. He could be the difference if he turns up, but I just don't really think Callum Hendry is going to make that difference to the side.
Yeah, it's difficult because St Johnstone are renowned for goal scoring, and they haven't been exactly creating opportunities. I think Stevie May still not their top striker in terms of goal scored, and that's just with 2. And we're sitting in January. And I remember that one of them being against Aberdeen. It was back in September. He scored that winner at Pittodrie. Obviously, St Johnstone facing a trip to Pittodrie come the weekend. But they also, have had problems keeping the ball out of the net, and they've looked to strengthen their defence, signing John Mahan from Sligo Rovers. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and pretend we know the ins and outs of him, but Callum Davidson acting to try and get somebody in else that can try and help that defence. Because look, if you're not going to score goals, you're going to have to stop other teams from doing that against you if you're going to even look to pick up any form of points just now.
Yeah, and I think that kind of sums up what that St Johnstone team did last season. You know, if you look at the two cup finals, they were both 1-0 victories, and I think that's what they showed people. They can hold on to leads, and I think, you know, Sean Rooney and the defence was really impressive. Jason Kerr obviously has gone away. They've sort of lost that, and they don't really have that. I think Xander Clark as well. At the start of the season, in the back of my mind, I was thinking he could be Scotland's number one soon. If Craig Gordon doesn't last, if he doesn't have a few good games, if he possibly wants to retire internationally, in my mind, I was thinking Xander Clark is the man to step up. But now I've totally lost it. I don't even know if he'll make the next Scotland squad. You know, the form's just has been poor. I think he can get back there. I think, as we said, he'll move to a team. I think he was quite close to Aberdeen as well at this transfer window. And if they'd lost him, I think that would have been curtains for sure. But yeah, it's a really difficult decision. And it's the classic line. It's at the other end of the table, but, you know, goals can win you matches, but it's your defence that'll win you titles. If you're keeping clean sheets, 1-0 victories, quite often a manager would rather have a 1-0 than a 5-4, so to speak. And if they can get that form back, if they can make themselves hard to beat, I think it'll go a long way in keeping them in this fight, because at the end of the day, if they can get draws, those points could be absolutely massive, especially when you look at the likes of Dundee, who ship goals quite frequently this season. If they can just be a bit more resolute defensively, St Johnstone, that is, I think they can have a massive step towards staying up. I think, as well as we've spoken about, they can't score goals. If Stevie May on 2 goals is their top goal scorer, they're going to have to try and find another way of winning matches.
And I suppose the perfect, you know, way of bouncing back from a cup exit and the disappointment of going out to Kelty would be responding tomorrow, will be Wednesday night, I apologise, when they host fellow strugglers Dundee. Obviously there'll be kind of a more in-depth preview in tomorrow night's show, but, you know, obviously we're looking at St Johnstone in particular here tonight, Stu, and that game suddenly, after the weekend's result, takes on a huge importance for St Johnstone's season, because they face potentially going 5 points adrift of just a playoff place if they were to lose that game.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And I think as well, in recent weeks, we've seen Ross County, obviously prior to the Cup, they picked up a big win over Motherwell. We've seen them sort of distancing themselves. They've picked up form, they've done really well. And I feel it's kind of becoming a bit of a two with Dundee and St Johnstone. And obviously that's the game coming up. It's absolutely massive. And I think as well, Cam Davidson's future, you've got to be worried for. How do you think this will impact him? Do you think if St Johnstone lose this to Dundee, do you think that could be it for Cam Davidson, or do you think they will possibly give him a little bit more time? Because although he's come out and said the back end, I think we've seen that so often in football that a manager says, I've got the back end. I think Claudio Ranieri said it after the weekend, and he's been sacked today for Watford. Yeah, so I don't think that's always the be all and end all when a board says that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be sitting here comparing St Johnstone to the managerial sacking experts that are Watford Football Club. But look, it's a huge game for Callum Davidson and St Johnstone, because if they, as we said, if they lose that, they're 5 points adrift. But I want to go back to the point you made, Struan. If they go and get rid of Callum Davidson on Wednesday, that's giving them, what's that going to be, 6 days to get somebody new that would maybe want to bring in their own players. That's a really small window. So unless they have somebody ready-made, lined up, you know, I'm going to throw a name out here, maybe Jack Ross, currently free, looking for work. I heard him saying on the BBC, you know, he knows the league. Is that somebody maybe that they could bring in immediately? You know, we're not obviously advocating Callum Davidson to lose his job here, but I'm just thinking on the bigger picture that if St Johnstone were to find themselves in trouble, it's going to be a tough ask. I think you made that point excellently. It's so close to the end of the January transfer window. No new manager is really going to have the opportunity to put their own personal stamp on the squad. So really, again, to the point you made, Callum Hendry coming back, is that a signal that St Johnstone aren't going to spend the rest of the window? They're just bringing in players that they had previously sent out. Was it Cammy McPherson from St Mirren? Was he recalled to St Johnstone, or was that the other way around? I'm not sure which way that worked again. But again, I just don't see them sacking Callum Davidson based on Wednesday's result, even if they were to lose, because I think both teams face tricky games the weekend coming up after. But look, we're going to come on to Dundee and the kind of acquisitions they're maybe looking to make, that's more encouraging than what St Johnstone are doing, on my opinion anyway. I don't know how you feel on that.
I think that's a really interesting point about Jack Ross coming in, to be honest, because I think when you look at the availability of managers, there isn't that obvious candidate who could come in. And I think Jack Ross is Premiership quality. Obviously, he's got experience at top level clubs like Hibs and Sunderland recently. It didn't work out at either of those clubs, but he's been there. That could be something for St Johnstone to look at. But it's a really difficult position. And one of the situations that I saw the comparison to, and I found it quite interesting, actually going back to Claudio Ranieri, was when he won the title with Leicester in the 2015-16 season in England. And obviously it was a historical achievement, one of the biggest upsets in football you'll ever see. Fantastic moment. And then the season after, obviously it wasn't going to last. Leicester found themselves in a bit of a relegation fight, and they sacked him and brought in Craig Shakespeare. And then they were able to stay up that season. And then from there, obviously, they've done well. They're back in Europe. Brendan Rodgers, transfer business, etc., etc. And I don't know if St Johnstone, as much as you'd want to hold on to Cam Davidson, everything that he's done for that club, at the same time, if they sacked him now, brought somebody in, they could stay in the Premiership. And although loyalty is one thing, in football, it's a short-term business. I think the average length of a manager's contract these days is about 18 months or something like that. Yeah. So many teams in the Premiership in the last few years alone have changed their manager. I think it could be a decision that they say, would we rather stay loyal to Cam Davidson, or do we take that risk of staying in the Premiership, especially if they do lose to Dundee? It's going to be a really difficult decision. And I'd love to hear what the majority of St Johnstone fans feel about that, because obviously Cam Davidson, as I said, less than 12 months ago, 6-7 months ago, is a hero. Absolutely fantastic achievements for the club. But now you have to look at it. Would you rather stick by him and go through this period, or is it perhaps an opportunity to sack him, which is horrible? You never want to hear that. I don't really like talking about managerial sackings at times like this, especially in this scenario where what Cam Davidson did was brilliant. But at the same time, somebody like Jack Ross could be the difference maker. Somebody else who's available. I don't know what Yogi Hughes' situation is. Well, what's happening there? I don't know what Sam Allardyce might be up to these days either. But yeah, it's a really difficult one. And I think it's a massive, massive week for St Johnstone. This fixture coming up and the end of the January transfer window, that it's a bit of a cliche, but it really could define the season.
Yeah, I suppose if Kilmarnock hadn't acted as promptly as they did, even Derek McInnes could have been free. But again, another former Hibs manager, Neil Lennon's also sitting available, I'm sure, to just send some shivers down your spine there, Struan. But again, I just had a quick glance at the table, and probably the significance of Wednesday is the fact that Ross County are currently 7 points clear of St Johnstone as well. Obviously, they occupy 10th place. They travel to Dundee United again. That game will be previewed on tomorrow night's show. But there's a 10-goal difference in the team's goal difference. So that's nearly verging on 8 points. That's 3 games that St Johnstone would need to win. They're on a terrible run of form that you don't see where 3 wins are coming from. 7 points is still 2 wins and a draw just to even get on points with Ross County, but you still be behind on goal difference. So again, possibly when the St Johnstone board are looking at that table, it might not just be, are they going to say, right, we'll just aim to finish 11th, we'll take the playoff and hope for the best? Or do they throw money at it and go, we've got to try and get 10th? Because we saw last season what happened to Kilmarnock. Almost finished 11th, thought they could get through the playoff, and they're now where they are. So big decisions coming up for the board at St Johnstone, I feel.
I think there's quite a lot of parallels actually that you could draw between Kelly last season and St Johnstone this season. Obviously, the whole managerial situation, Kelly eventually did sack their manager and bring in Tommy Wright, but obviously it was a little too late at that point. And maybe St Johnstone might be looking at that and thinking, is it earlier? Do we need to bring in a new manager and look at that? And Kelly, as you say, they got to 11th and it looked like they were going to be able to do it. But then obviously Dundee in the playoffs, it's the 10th place that they really want. And as I said earlier on, I think Ross County have picked up their form fantastically, and they've always been scoring goals this season. I don't think that's been too much of an issue for them. They've always been winning, or even when they're losing games, they're losing 3-2. They're always finding ways, to score 2 against Hearts this season, beat Hibs as well. They've had massive results, and it's not something that St Johnstone have had this season. And in many games as well, when I've been looking at the scores, and I've not been watching many St Johnstone games this season to hold my hands up, but when I'm checking the scores and whenever I see them go 1-0 down, even if it's in the 23rd, 24th minute, even in the 45th minute, I basically just accept that that's them probably going to lose or draw at best, because you don't see them finding a way back into the match. Whereas with Ross County, even Dundee as well, I expect them to actually put up a bit more of a fight against the bigger teams. So it's a massive decision to make, and I really really I'm a little bit concerned for St Johnstone at this point, because even a month ago I didn't think they were going to get relegated. I thought they were going to have enough in them, but it's just not gone well. I think it's 10 defeats in a row now, and as you say, that points difference between Ross County. If Ross County, they could lose a lot of games as well, but you don't fancy St Johnstone to catch up to them. I think it really could come down to these relegation 6-pointers.
Yeah, and as you say, the teams above them are putting in a bit more fight. You need to look at the last midweek card where Ross County with 10 men dispatched the Motherwell. So again, another example of teams maybe just showing that bit more fight that St Johnstone are lacking. But as I said, there'll maybe be a bit more in-depth chat, because I didn't expect to be spending 20 minutes chatting all things St Johnstone. But look, they are probably the story of the season so far. And we like to cover every team as much as possible here on the State of Scottish Football. But we'll look at a few other scores from the Scottish Cup weekend, Struan. No real upsets, unfortunately, Kelty aside. All the lower league or non-league sides, unfortunately, fell. Baxadee 3-0 at home to Wraith Rovers. East Kilbride pushed Peterhead all the way, but ultimately fell on penalties. Auchinleck, many people maybe tipped them to upset Hearts. Hearts, though, have a very professional job dispatching them 5-0. And Darvel, unfortunately, they came unstuck at Championship League leaders Arbroath 3-0. Motherwell, they saw themselves progress in a very dramatic fashion. At
Liam Donnelly.
At home to Morton. Is this kind of setup that we've seen this season with no replay going straight to extra time? Maybe do you think that maybe benefited a couple of the league sides? Thinking Peterhead, maybe, I know obviously it came to penalties, but Dundee United obviously came through in extra time against Kilmarnock, and Motherwell as well at Morton. Has this new format, given the fixture congestion, benefited the full-time teams?
I'd say definitely. Not St Johnstone though, but I think for the rest of the teams, I think it's been great. I remember watching the game on Thursday, the Cove Rangers Hibs, the first of the games, and when it was approaching the 80th minute, I was asking around the messaging in chats like, do these go to extra time? Do we get replays now? And at the time, I don't like replays. I'm not a big fan of it. I do like when a lower league team gets a big team coming to them, though. I do like that. I think that's great for the occasion. But at the same time, quite often, I just rather see extra time, and I love penalties, especially when you're neutral. It's a great watch. And the one that hurt me the most, I think, this weekend was seeing Clydebank. They came so close, and so many people in group chats that I was seeing on Twitter, on social media, everybody was just screaming Bankies. It was absolutely fantastic, and I was getting a bit carried away, and then obviously it crumbled away. 119th, 124th minute, whatever it was in the end for Annan Athletic, just got in. And then they would have had Rangers as well. It's one of those ones. But I think getting these extra time definitely does help the teams, because one of the interesting points as well, going back to the Cove Rangers game, was people were saying that Cove looked really tired at the end of full time, and you thought, Hibs have got that better fitness levels as a Premiership team. You'd expect them to be of a higher fitness, and then come the end of it, they'd probably just blast them away. And it seemed like across the weekend, that did sort of help the Premiership teams. They were able to use that experience, possibly more quality off the bench that they've got as well to win the games. And I think it definitely does help the other teams. But at the same time, I like it. I like getting to extra time, and I like the thought of penalties. I think was Peterhead the only game that actually went to penalty? Which is a shame, the only one. But
I think most of us were maybe expecting Morton and Clydebank games to go to penalties, but for injury time, in extra time drama to undo the excitement, and not unless you support either of those teams. As you said, for the neutral. But Clydebank potentially getting Rangers, Aberdeen, getting Motherwell. It could have been Morton. The way you want to look at these, does the draw open up? But we will look at the draw. There's been some standout ties. Obviously, TV picks for BBC, because we know who Premier Sports are going to pick. We won't bother arguing over who Premier are going to pick. But Arbroath, their reward for beating Darvel is a home tie against your team, Struan. What was your initial thoughts to that draw? Is it one of trepidation or excitement getting a lower league team away?
I was a little bit excited to see Arbroath, because I love Arbroath. I want them to get promoted. But then I'm also a bit scared, because I think this could be a banana skin. Looking at the game against Cove Rangers, I thought they put up a great fight. And I think Arbroath are there as well to tell a lot of people, if we're wanting to be in the Premiership next season, we need to put up a fight, especially against the team in the Cup. And I think it'll be a really good game. I'm looking forward to it. I'm nervous. I'm nervously excited, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. But I think it'll be a really good tie. And looking across the board, obviously there are a few Premiership clashes in there, but I think this is probably the tie that I'm most excited for, just to see how Arbroath do against a Premiership side, how they can get on from there. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I loved it, Campbell. I love the team. It's a bit annoying. Normally, I'd want them to win against any other team, but unfortunately, on this occasion, I'm going to have to want them to lose.
Yeah, I will be surprised if that game is not picked for TV.
I will be quite gutted if it's not. But
I think it'll be interesting to see maybe what the second BBC pick is for TV. As I said, I think Premier, we all know what games they will focus as. Annan's reward for beating Clydebank is obviously hosting Rangers, and Celtic getting Wraith Rovers at home. Probably the biggest shock out of that 2 draws was the fact that Rangers were actually away from home.
Yeah, I'm stunned.
Yeah, I know. Normally they get the luxury of a home tie, but as we said, Kelty's reward for knocking out St Johnstone is a trip to Paisley to face St Mirren, and Dundee may be facing a little tricky tie up north to Balmoral and facing Peterhead. Maybe they've got a bit of appeal to the BBC.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think Motherwell Aberdeen as well, being the Premiership tie, it might have that sway. But I'd like Hearts, to be honest. Kelty Hearts, that is. I'd like to see their game, to be honest. I think they've deserved it. Obviously, we've spoken at length about what they did to St Johnstone. I think they deserve a TV game as well. If nothing else, what they've done this season, they've absolutely walked League Two. And I think even if it's just one game this season, to go on the BBC for a cup tie, I think would be absolutely fantastic. And it is sort of one of those where you feel they've earned it. What was it, 103rd minute winner against St Johnstone, knocking out a Premiership side. That's fantastic. St Mirren as well. And as I said earlier on, I wouldn't be that surprised if Kelty Hearts beat St Mirren. And for that reason, I'd love to watch the game. I'd love for them to have that on TV, because I think there is that giant killing element of it. I don't think it's a League Two versus Premiership. It'll be a walkover for St Mirren, but I think it could be a really good game. Equally, though, I think Dundee versus Peterhead is going to be really interesting, because we spoke about as well how St Johnstone going out of the cup could be massive for them in their relegation fight. I don't know if it could be the same for Dundee. I don't know how much focus or effort they're going to fully put into this cup with one eye on the league, especially if they lose to St Johnstone and they're in a much worse relegation battle at that point. I don't know if then they'll focus on, say, right, we might just need to sacrifice the cup this week, or perhaps just not go full strength like we would normally. So yeah, I think those would be 2 games that I'd really like to see, definitely. But I have a feeling it could be Motherwell Aberdeen, which again I think would be a good tie.
Yeah, I also agree. I do think possibly the pool of, you look at, as we said, Premier like to pick the old firm because they know the audience that they're going to draw, is probably why the Motherwell Aberdeen game maybe will be picked. But that's one of two all Premiership ties in the Scottish Cup, is Hearts Livingston. It is the other. But there's no real, for me, other than really the Arbroath Hibs game, and as you've kind of alluded to, St Mirren and Kelty, no real draw that kind of screams, oh, there's going to be the potential of an upset there. The one I'm really kind of excited for, which you often don't get in the Scottish Cup, because there's more of these ties that stand out, but we haven't really got that on this occasion.
Yeah, there's not many ties to me that I am thinking like, oh, that could be a cracker. We'll see a great game there. That I think, with the exception of potentially Kelty Hearts and Hibs Arbroath, I think a lot of them you'd expect them to be quite straightforward. I expect both Old Firm teams to be pretty comfortable victories, to be honest, especially as well with all their focus on the actual league title heating up as well. I think they'll just be able to walk over these games. I think even the likes of Hearts Livy, I'd fancy Hearts to come away with that. I think coming into that game, Livingston are in much better form, but equally I think Hearts will have too much for them. Whether or not John Suter plays will be another question, but yeah, there aren't too many ties to me that have stood out and I thought, whoa, I was a bit deflated, I guess would be the best thing to say after the draw. There weren't too many that I was really excited for, but hopefully there'll be goals galore, there'll be a bonanza, it'll be great watching whatever games do get put on TV in the end.
Well, if you were deflated, how do you think I felt drawing a team that we've not even scored against this season, let alone beaten? So
no Tony Watt.
Yeah, well, no Tony Watt, but it was Kevin Van Veen that's tormented our defence so far this season. So yeah, and it's the fact that it's going to be 2 weeks in a row we've got to take a trip to Lanarkshire. Certainly it isn't the best to look forward to, but hopefully we can get the better of them for the first time. But we're going to just briefly touch on Celtic. They, I don't want to use the word scraped past Alloa, as the scoreline maybe suggests, but they got a very probably routine win against the League One side. But the biggest takeaway for Celtic will be the amount of injuries that once again they've come away with. Callum McGregor probably the most serious of the injuries, a facial injury. It's not been confirmed the extent. But for both Scotland and Celtic, Struan, how much of a concern is that injury to Callum McGregor, obviously the Celtic captain as well?
I think it's massively worrying. I think more from Scotland. Obviously, I can't speak for the Celtic fans, but I think the new signings that have come in have done really well, and I think that's potentially they could fill that void if necessary. I think Gucci and Matate, if I've pronounced that correctly.
Maeda is that other one.
I think he's the forward. Yeah,
it's Hatate then.
Hatate, yeah, the midfielder. Yeah, sorry, yeah. I think they've done well coming in, and I think a lot of people are pretty comfortable with how they've adapted to Scottish football, albeit only after a few games to make that adjustment. But I think Callum McGregor's massive loss, possibly his leadership, will be the biggest thing rather than the actual quality on the pitch. From a Scottish point of view, though, the quality does worry me. Thinking back to that Faroe Islands game where Lyndon Dykes scored the winner at the end of it, that was the first game from a few that we dropped Callum McGregor, and he'd never really gotten the praise, but it was a case of you don't know what you've got until he was gone. And when he was gone, I think we noticed there was a big drop-off in that midfield. And although somebody like McTominay could just slip into that midfield to play alongside McGinn and Gilmore, I think what Callum McGregor's done has been fantastic for Scotland. And I think he's one of these players who does so much work off the ball. He's just very underappreciated what he does. You know, he's never going to grab the headlines, although he did score against Croatia, but he's never going to be that main man like what John McGinn does in the midfield. He's never going to be bursting forward, making the goals. He's just really important to the side. And I think Steve Clarke will be worrying about whether or not he's going to get him back in time for that Ukraine tie, because he's absolutely massive. But as I say, I think for Celtic, it won't be too big of an issue. I think the wider issue for Celtic is how many injuries are stacking up coming into this Old Firm, and then on the other side of the coin, how many players Rangers are getting back. I think Celtic will definitely be concerned about the way these things are happening, and I think it could be one of these situations where at the end of the season, that's where Celtic lost the title, was when Callum McGregor picked up the injury. It's one of those moments that you could look back on and say that moment there exactly was when things went wrong for Celtic and when everything changed. So it's massive. I think it's going to be a really difficult time for Scotland. Celtic, not so much with the other midfielders, but saying that, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, and I suppose, it's obviously with no disrespect to the other teams that both Celtic and Rangers are playing in the coming weeks, but it seems that all focus from both the green and blue half of Glasgow is on the game a week on Wednesday. And as we alluded to, obviously, Callum McGregor will almost definitely miss that. David Turnbull still struggling with injury. Kyogo, I know there's rumours and possibly conspiracy theories, depending on who you support, whether or not he's going to be fit. But Gucci limped off after in my opinion, bottling a bit of a 50-50 challenge. I know those of the green persuasion will think it should have been a red card. And Leela Bada also limping off at the weekend. But on top of those injuries, Struan, you've also, at the weekend, it was confirmed that Tom Rogic was called up to the Australian squad, and Maeda, who obviously started so brightly against Hibs, scoring on his debut, has been called up for the Japanese squad. So both those players, on top of the injuries, will miss the Old Firm game through international call-ups. It's just turning into a real headache, not just for the game on Wednesday for Ange Postecoglou, but further ahead to that game, which obviously potentially has a lot of importance for the title race.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems to be every day another Celtic player is missing this game for one reason or another. It's quite ridiculous, and I'm sure we'll touch on Rangers coming into it in a second, but just from Celtic's point of view, it must be so worrying to see these players going out. I mean, I think Kyogo's picked up 2 or 3 injuries already this season, and another one coming into this one. It's a difficult situation. Obviously, we spoke about Callum McGregor there, and it's all over the field as well. These injuries are occurring, so it's going to be absolutely crucial, I guess, that Ange Postecoglou could get some of these players back, or potentially can have his other players step up, especially in such a difficult situation. Obviously there as well, Tom Rogic going away to Australia. It's just another one of these things that, how has this happened at this time for Celtic? It's ridiculous. And then a couple injuries picked up in the cup. At least Giacomakis seems to be scoring goals now at last. That's one positive to take away from Celtic coming into this game. And it's one of those ones where you look at it and you think, you'd possibly fancy Rangers for this game anyway, with the general quality of the two teams. Rangers' depth has always been better than Celtic's before Ange Postecoglou, before Brandt Bronckhorst just coming into this season. And it looks as if, once again, that depth could be the main reason or one of the biggest factors coming into the Old Firm.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That depth could prove to be a factor with the fact that Joe Aribo may be disappointed to be knocked out of the African Cup of Nations over the weekend, but his disappointment is Rangers' delight because he will now be fit and back to face Celtic for the Old Firm game, providing no English clubs or any clubs else around Europe fancy bidding for him between now and the transfer window, and also Kemar Roof not selected in the Jamaica squad. So both those players. So while Celtic seem to be losing players, Rangers, who I definitely think missed Joe Aribo in the match at Tawdry last week, are gaining players who have such an influence on how Rangers play, especially in that forward area. So it's that real kind of weighing things up, and it's just when Celtic think they're getting the upper hand, something just swings back in Rangers' favour. But look, we've got a game, midweek card and weekend card. There is maybe suspensions and injuries still to come between now and then. Maybe more so on the injury front for Celtic, but maybe not suspensions given that 8-point dossier from Rangers. So we'll wait and see how that pans out.
It does seem to be, isn't it, that one game coming up Celtic, you almost guess, right, who's going to get injured? It's not a question of will Celtic pick up another injury, it's going to be who's actually going to go out of this one. And just touching on the Aberdeen and the Rangers game there, you mentioned about the loss of Joe Aribo. Do you think him coming in will totally change the way Rangers play? Because for me, I think Aribo has been the best player in Scotland this season. I think he's been absolutely excellent at a time, especially where a lot of Rangers players have not been anywhere near what they were last season. He's obviously made the difference. Do you think him coming back can give them that kick on in this game, especially where, just looking at 2022 effectively, in the end of 2021, it looked like Celtic were really building that momentum, and you're thinking this Old Firm could be the difference. Could having Joe Aribo completely swing that in Rangers' favour?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, people are going to think I'm being biased because I don't exactly hold Scott Wright in the highest of esteem, but when you're facing Scott Wright compared to Joe Aribo, you're going to be a lot less concerned. Joe Aribo, we've seen the power, we've seen the pace that he possesses, and he's got that finishing ability from all angles, whether that be with his head, with his feet. He offers a diverse threat to any team's defence, whereas Scott Wright, in my opinion, doesn't offer that. So Rangers now have that ability to start Joe Aribo, cause teams problems, and then maybe when their defence is tiring out, you bring on a Scott Wright, and then use his pace to expose that tiredness, that weakness that is maybe there from a battering from the likes of Aribo, the likes of Morelos, even Cedric Itten obviously getting minutes in his legs on Friday night. Okay, it's Stirling Albion, but again, him getting on the score sheet as well. You speak of Giakoumakis getting a goal, building his confidence. It'll do Cedric Itten's confidence a world of good. The game, the backdrop to this game is bubbling away nicely. Obviously, we won't see both sets of fans in the game itself, but it's certainly building to something. I do feel Celtic have got the trickier of the two games, certainly in midweek this week with a trip to Tynecastle. We know what that can possess. It didn't win there on the opening day of the season. So, if they come through that with 3 points, then they'll obviously take some confidence that going into United at the weekend. So the game's, as I say, bubbling away nicely, and it'll be interesting to see how both sides kind of fare or come out of the next couple of games ahead of that game on Wednesday night, a week on Wednesday.
I think that's really interesting as well, isn't it? The fact that Celtic have got Hearts, which is a really tough tie. And if you think if Celtic lose that one and lose the Old Firm, you could effectively say this time next week, just about in 2 weeks' time, that's the title race over. Spoke about it being a really big week for St Johnstone, but for Celtic as well, it's absolutely massive. And it's in the back of Postecoglou's mind as well coming into this Hearts game. You're thinking you need to get 3 points, and he also needs to keep his players fit. He needs to be rotating. There's a lot of tough decisions coming up for Postecoglou and Celtic. I think it's going to be a really good weekend in general for Scottish football.
Yeah, exciting, and it's great to be speaking of it so positively, because as much as we want to say it affecting the title race, the game again will be probably previewed a bit more in depth tomorrow night on tomorrow night's show. Hearts probably will be sitting there with one eye thinking we could close the gap here. We've already beaten them at home once this season. Why should we be afraid of doing that again? So certainly something to keep an eye on. But there is one game tomorrow night in the Scottish Premiership, Struan, as Aberdeen travel to Paisley to face St Mirren. The home side, having conquered Ayr in the Scottish Cup 2-0, are back on home comfort although home comforts probably isn't the word most St Mirren fans will use, having only won once this season, albeit against Tuesday night's visitors in Aberdeen. Jim Goodwin, however, has held clear the air talks with Jamie McGrath, who has missed the last 2 games. Do you think, with 1 week to go in the transfer window, Jamie McGrath, despite these clear the air talks, will play tomorrow night against Aberdeen?
I think it'll be a really interesting one now, because that's 2 transfer windows in a row. It looked set that Jamie McGrath was going to leave St Mirren, and for different clubs, it looked as if he was going to be going to Aberdeen this transfer window, and Hibs and I think Celtic as well were actually rumoured in a few down south in the summer. I think it's a case of, if he's not going to get the move, he might as well play. I think if he's going to be at the club for the next 6 months until the summer, he might as well play. St Mirren need him. It's that classic saying that we've come up with St Mirren over the last few months, few seasons, that if Jamie McGrath's playing well, St Mirren are playing well. If he's not playing well, St Mirren aren't playing well. So I think they'll really need him back. Obviously, as you say, St Mirren as well, their home record has been pretty abysmal this season. They're going to need to change that around. Aberdeen coming off a really good result against Rangers, in my opinion, last week. They'll be up for this one. They probably want to show Jamie McGrath why he should have come to Aberdeen in the first place. Aberdeen have brought in a new winger from Holland as well. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a minute. So I think Aberdeen will be really up for this one. And I think Jim Goodwin needs to put Jamie McGrath in if he can. If he doesn't play, though, I think that'll be really interesting, just to see if he will get that move out in January, or perhaps if tensions are going to rise. If it's because the worst possible outcome that you really don't want is a fallout, but no transfer this window. So for the rest of the season, he just sort of sits in the bench and in the reserves at St Mirren. You want to avoid that at all costs. And I think for that reason, he probably will play, whether or not he leaves this summer, this transfer window or not. I think he'll get a start.
I think, though, from maybe a St Mirren point of view, it'll be an interesting one, because he's not played the last 2 games, and they ended a run of 11 games without a win, without him in the team. Obviously, we're not using that as a correlation of their results, but it's that age-old why change a winning formula? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, but he is a key player for St Mirren. And when you're coming up against these sort of teams in Aberdeen, Celtic, Rangers, you want to be playing your best players. And Jamie McGrath, by all consideration, is that for St Mirren. But, Aberdeen have a lot of firepower. St Mirren, not so much. But both the games between these sides this season, Struan, have produced 5 goals. St Mirren coming out 3-2 winners in the first meeting, and Aberdeen kind of blowing St Mirren away in the second meeting, 4-1 at Tawdry. Now, the scoreline maybe suggests St Mirren didn't do much that night, but having been at that game, St Mirren were pretty unfortunate that they only did score 1. And that's maybe a summarization of their season. All huff and puff in front of goal, but just struggling to get the ball in the net. We speak about St Johnstone's problems finding a goal scorer. Do St Mirren need an out-and-out goal scorer to kind of, if they want to target a top 6 finish?
Yeah, I think definitely. I don't think Eamon Brophy is doing it at all, to be perfectly honest. I think they really need to find that goal scorer for a totally different reason to what St Johnstone do. With St Johnstone, we're talking about, can they get it to stay up? St Mirren, they want to get it to push to the top half of the table. And I think that's definitely what this side are lacking. I think, I'm not actually sure who St Mirren's top goal scorer is at the moment, but we've spoken a lot about what McGrath can do. And one of the reasons that classic line is there of, if McGrath's played well, St Mirren played well, even though it doesn't apply to the recent results, it's because they don't have anybody else up front who's really doing it, who's really being a match winner, providing the goals, making that difference. And I think that's what Jim Goodwin majorly has lacked this season. I like him. I think he's a really good manager, but I think there's only so much he can do at times, and quite often I feel a bit sorry for him because he just doesn't have that goal scorer. And I think that is the big difference of the St Mirren team. As you say, they're the 2 games producing 5 goals. Obviously, I think in the 3-2, did O'Shaughnessy not score 2, or am I mistaken with that? I feel like
no, he didn't. It was Connor Ronan that scored twice, and Curtis Main, of course, coming back to haunt Aberdeen.
Made sense. Stevie May as well.
Thanks for bringing back those memories.
No problem. But I'm totally wrong on that one there. But yeah, I just, St Mirren just haven't quite been able to do it this season, and I think I don't suspect them to get anybody this transfer window, but I don't think they're going to be really pushing for that top half of the table if they can't bring in an out-and-out goal scorer.
Yeah, I noticed Christian Dennis has featured a lot in the last couple of games, but just the 1 goal for him. I had to do a quick search to see who their top goal scorer was, and it's quite interesting because, like you, I don't really remember or feel that Eamon Brophy has done much for St Mirren this season. He's their top goal scorer, albeit with 6 goals, and I think it says a lot that their next best is Joe Shaughnessy with 4. So when your centre back's your second top goal scorer, it does
it's not
say
great.
a lot about your season.
I'm really surprised. Was it 6 Brophy had?
6, yeah. I'm trying to even think.
I can't even think when he got more than like 2.
No. If anyone in the comments wants to let us know when Eamon Brophy managed to score a goal, let alone 6, please do keep me and Struan reliably informed.
There was probably one against Hibs, actually. I've probably missed the really obvious one that I've tried to block out of my mind at some point from this season. But yeah, no, I honestly can't think where he's got 6 goals from.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't him that scored. No, because he came off injured at Pittodrie, so he definitely hasn't scored against Aberdeen so far this season, I'm going to say. But from an Aberdeen point of view, obviously Aberdeen have been in the media a lot over the last 7 days. Obviously a lot to do with Scott Brown and his so-called antics that is riling up anyone and everyone associated with Rangers football clubs. But once again, Aberdeen will be looking to build on, as you called it, a positive result against Rangers. Aberdeen's away form hasn't been great this season. I think it's only 3 wins we've got away from home. Once you get a decent result, a positive result against the likes of Celtic and Rangers, it's important for Aberdeen to go and follow that up against St Mirren, especially when teams above them, Motherwell and Hibs, face off against each other on Wednesday night. So this is a big game from an Aberdeen point of view. Yeah,
definitely. I absolutely love the clip of when Scott Brown's just talking in tactics and then Ryan Kent goes past him and just waves him off and it went viral. I was absolutely loving it. Everybody who don't even like Scottish football was referencing it. But it's absolutely massive for Aberdeen. And as you say, obviously coming off the back of that result against Rangers, 2 really good results against Rangers this season for Aberdeen. And it feels like sort of a third into the season where Stephen Glass looked like he was under a lot of pressure and Aberdeen couldn't buy a win at that point. A couple of results turned around and they had a really good end to 2021. The results did come, and I think they need to use that game against Rangers as that springboard again to keep going well. And as you say, it's the perfect opportunity with Motherwell and Hibs playing against each other. One of them or both have to drop points. I think Aberdeen are 1 behind Hibs, 2 behind Motherwell as well. So, and I think
just 3 behind. So it's 3 behind Motherwell just now. If we were to win tomorrow night, we would go 4th for 24 hours. So it maybe be probably looking for a draw in that game between Motherwell and Hibs from an Aberdeen point of view.
That's massive. It's, I know a lot of people sometimes mention games in hand. For me, you always want to be the one setting it. You always want to move ahead and make the other teams catch up to you. And I think if Aberdeen can do that, it's absolutely massive because all that really does is just put more pressure on Motherwell and Hibs. And it's pressure that both of them, they don't need given how important that game is going to be coming up this week. So I think it's absolutely massive and crucial that Aberdeen go away and get a result here. And with some of the transfer business that's going on as well, it's quite an exciting period.
It is. And speaking of transfers, it was announced today that Aberdeen signed winger Vicente Bizain from ADO Den Haag. I'll do the pronunciation.
Thank you.
for you, Stuart. Coming in, a bit of an unknown quantity, the 20-year-old. He played 30 times in the Eredivisie last season. He's played 25 times after Den Haag got relegated. So he's played 25 times in the Eerste Divisie, the Dutch second division, 6 goals and 9 assists. So a bit prolific, but I suppose, to keep, level-headed, not get carried away. The fact is maybe the Dutch football is a bit more technical. You've got a bit more time on the ball than you do it over in Scotland. Stephen Glass coming out in his press conference today, not sure if his visa will be approved in time for tomorrow night's fixture. If he doesn't feature tomorrow, he is likely to play St Johnstone on Saturday. But Aberdeen going about their business quietly, obviously with the rumours around Ryan Hedges possibly departing the club, maybe a replacement or, in my opinion, a position we definitely needed to strengthen in terms of creativity and someone that can help Christian Ramirez up top.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's spot on. They're just giving the service to Ramirez that I think has been lacking from Aberdeen this season. So often it's the fullbacks in Mackenzie and Ramsey who have been the ones to provide that spark. We think about the likes of Matty Longstaff actually couldn't really do in that midfield. I think it's absolutely great. And what I like is I think this was quite out of nowhere, wasn't it, this signing? I don't think there was too many rumours coming into it. And I really like signings that just come out of nowhere. And I think it's exciting because I think Aberdeen previously were linked to Mikey Johnston. And I'll get your thoughts on that in a minute. But for me, I just don't think it was a great signing. I'm not that big a fan of Mikey Johnston. I think possibly 2 years ago, it would have been a really good signing. But I'm just not quite sure he's at it there. Do you think this is a different step and a different approach from Aberdeen that's perhaps a positive one, not going for the tried and tested Mikey Johnston who you don't quite know what you're going to get and going for something a little bit different?
Yeah, not going for the tried and tested loaning players from Celtic and having your
Yeah.
heart broken when Ryan Christie goes back and then goes on to bigger and better things. I wasn't prepared for that level of heartbreak again. But no, I do share that sentiment on Mikey Johnson. When I saw the name, branded about, I wasn't enamored by it. As you alluded to there, he kind of burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, but I don't know whether it's injuries or opportunities, has not really had much at Celtic in recent times. But a deal I didn't agree with was the fact that it was going to be a loan deal with the option to buy. But that's not to say that he might not have been able to earn a new deal at Celtic Park. And I'm not for developing players of your rivals or teams ahead of you in the league. It just doesn't sit well with me. As I said, we just need to take one look at what we did with Ryan Christie. Took him for 18 months, developed him, and then he came back to cause endless heartbreak. So, yeah, look, I'm glad we've gone down a different route. It seems to be the route that Aberdeen are taking, signing young players with a clear pathway to first-team football. Maybe you want to call it a stepping stone to bigger and better things, such as the English Premiership, English Championship. But if we're going to be that club that gets a couple of years out of players and then, turns it into millions of pounds a la Dundee United a few years back, then look, I'm all here for it. I think we paid rumoured to be about between 300,000 and 500,000 for Bigail. That was the intent, to get him in now rather than wait till the end of the season. Fending off Scottish teams, most likely Hibs, because anyone that you try and sign, we sign instead.
Right?
Yeah.
When I read that, I just thought in the back of my mind straight away, it's probably Hibs, isn't it?
Yeah. I just wish it was confirmed by a journalist.
Scottish team. Hibs.
Yeah, exactly. And other teams from across Europe, obviously, exciting to read that he's a Dutch youth level, coming through the Ajax Academy as well. All these things that get fans excited. Just hopefully he lives up to that expectation. But no pressure on the lad. Look, nobody knows what he's coming with. His stats are good, but look, your highlight reel can be good and you don't perform on the pitch. So time will tell. But with the signing of one winger sees the departure of another. Northern Irishman Niall McGinn, maybe looking to retain his spot in the international scene, looks set to sign a deal at Dundee, an 18-month deal, leaving Aberdeen on a free. We were alluding to St Johnstone's transfer business earlier in the show. That is a huge signing, a huge coup, I feel, for Dundee. Possibly Niall McGinn looking, maybe settled in the Granite City, happy just to do the hour commute down to Dundee on a basis for training. But for Dundee, where they are in the league, signing somebody like Niall McGinn, I think that's a great signing for them.
Yeah, I think it was really good. I put it in our group chat just before we came live coming into this, because it was just announced. I think about an hour ago it came out, and he's a top level in the Premiership. He's a top level player, isn't he? To go to a team like Dundee, I think is massive. And I did think in the back of my mind there, and I'm glad you said it as well there, that the distance is possibly a factor in it if he's quite settled in Aberdeen. Obviously, he went away and came back, so obviously he does like the city, like the area, and perhaps that's the reason there. And I think another factor that could weigh into that is the fact that he didn't go to Kilmarnock. A lot of people thought, we'd maybe go with Derek McInnes, and somebody might argue that you've got a better chance of going into the Premiership next season at Killie than you would at Dundee. But I think it's absolutely massive. And obviously we spoke about St Johnstone's poor form. If Dundee can make signings like this, Jason Cummings has gone away to Australia, but bringing Niall McGinn in, I think is absolutely massive, and it could make that difference to them staying up. He could have a fantastic end to the season, and I think from James McPake's point of view, it's absolutely fantastic to us. I think that's a really good signing, and I think it's one of those ones that will go under the radar in the general scheme of things, this transfer window across Scotland. But I think it's one of the most important, or it could be one of the most important, I should say.
Yeah, look, he's getting on in age, and he's not got the pace of what Niall McGinn had when he hit the heights in 2014 to 2016 with Aberdeen before his move to Korea. But he's maybe got that quality, he's got that bit about him that can certainly help Dundee in their maybe ambitions. Currently 5 points behind Ross County in catching the likes of Ross County and St Mirren to avoid that playoff place. And maybe with you allude there, Jason Cummings leaving for Australia, Dundee aren't exactly blessed themselves with options up front. I don't think Niall McGinn would be the striker, but again, giving that service so that Dundee don't have to heavily rely on McMullen to get the ball in the box, or rely on Luke McCowan on the other side. Getting that better service to Danny Mullen up top, or even dead ball specialist in there as well. For Dundee to get him, especially on a free as well, I just think you're absolutely right. That's going to go under the radar as possibly one of the signings of the January transfer window in the Scottish Premiership.
I think it's one of those ones as well that you spoke about the matches coming up at the bottom of the table. He could be the difference in those crucial games against the other teams, the relegation zone, or against the teams around them, with a bit of moment of magic. And at times that's all you really need. I don't know if he could become a hero for Dundee, but as you say there, if he can provide the service, I don't think he's going to be an out-and-out goal scorer, and I would be surprised if he scored many at the end of this season, but he's going to be there as an option. I guess Lee Griffiths, I don't know what the situation with him and Dundee at the moment is, but if that's another person to potentially whip balls into him, it's an option for them there. And I think losing Jason Cummings but getting Niall McGinn, I think is better for Dundee, because I think having that creativity and a spark is better, because Cummings hasn't really been scoring the goals. I think he's only got about 5 or 6 this season. That seems to be the tally for every striker that we've mentioned, but he's not exactly been putting them away like he was in the Championship. I think a lot of people thought he would do better. Obviously, though, he's now moved to Central Coast Mariners, I believe it is, down south. So bringing somebody like Niall McGinn, especially on a free as well, as we said, I think they'll get money for Cummings, and to bring Niall McGinn in for free. Yeah, they're different ages. Obviously, Niall McGinn is the other side of 30, but what he can bring to that team, I think, is invaluable, to be honest. I think he'll be a really, really good signing, and I think James McPake will be absolutely buzzing, to be honest, that he's brought him in, especially for a team like Aberdeen as well. It's a really good signing.
And I just wonder whether the fact that Gordon Strachan there as technical directors maybe had a bit of an influence on that signing. But as well, he obviously comes with a lot less baggage than Jason Cummings probably possesses, far less baggage than Lee Griffiths possesses. But he could be the spark that kicks Lee Griffiths into life, providing him the opportunities to score goals. But when you look at the signing of a player of Niall McGinn's experience, yes, you're touching on age as well, he can benefit some of those Dundee wingers, some of those young players, because that midfield for Dundee is young, like some Max Anderson, Luke McCowan, as I mentioned earlier. Those players could benefit off of learning from Niall McGinn, whether it be for 6 months into next year as well, and only benefit their career. So from all aspects for Dundee, that can be a huge signing, because again, from to look back on an Aberdeen point of view, Dean Campbell has spoke in how much Scott Brown has helped him during training. Yes, Dean Campbell's maybe not had the minutes, but players learning that on the training pitch will only benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I think definitely, and it's one of those ones where a younger player can always get experience, and even still at Dundee, Charlie Adam last season, a lot of people praised what he could bring to the side, even in the dressing room, the stuff that you don't see on the pitch. Niall McGinn's got that been there, done it sort of career so far coming into this, so obviously that experience there can help a few of the young players, and I think it's absolutely massive. Quite often you say that an older player coming in will be useless, he doesn't have the legs anymore, but what he does have is the experience, and I think Scott Brown, as you mentioned, there's the perfect example of that. Coming into Aberdeen, obviously, he's not exactly the most inspiring signing. At 36, I think he is now, year old coming in, but I think he's been absolutely fantastic. I think he's helped players out. I think what he does in the dressing room as well will be absolutely massive, and I think that's exactly what Niall McGinn can bring, whether he's doing it on the pitch or doing it in the dressing room. I think he'll be a massive boost to not only the young players in the team, but just the other players, giving them that kick, giving them that backup. I'm not actually sure if he still is a Northern Irish international, but to have him an international...
I don't know whether he's actually been playing, but he has... I think that was kind of the shock. He was called up during the last international window, and I remember seeing the notification come through on Aberdeen's Twitter when they retweeted it and thinking, he's not even played this season. If he has, he's probably only played about 20 minutes yet. He's getting the international recognition that maybe other players you feel deserve, thinking of Scotland, aren't getting. Like, what is going on here? So, I don't think are they in the playoffs for the World Cup? I don't think they are.
I don't think so, no.
Maybe he's just thinking he maybe wants to try and get Northern Ireland to the Euros in 2024, maybe as one last hurrah, but that seems to be the emphasis where he's going. But yeah, certainly an interesting signing for Dundee, and a good one at that as well.
Yeah, bringing in an international as well, he's got that experience to add to it. I think it'll be absolutely massive. And as I say, I think it will go under the radar in the wide scheme of things. But for me, if it goes through again, I don't think it's fully confirmed yet, but it does look very likely to happen.
Yeah.
If it does go ahead, I think for me, it's going to be one of the most impactful, I think that's the best words to say, impactful signings that we're going to see this January. And it really could be that difference between relegation and staying in the league, because obviously the playoffs come into it as well. If they do go into the playoffs, having somebody like Niall McGinn, potentially a big game player, the experience there, what he's built up in his career, it could be absolutely massive.
Yeah, although my phone's still on airplane mode, so it might have been confirmed whilst we've been live on this show.
Yeah, true, actually. It might have happened 10 minutes ago, but you never know.
But if there is any Aberdeen and St Mirren fans that are tuning in and want a bit of a fuller preview of the game tomorrow, this is going to be a very selfish plug. Head over to Red Tinted Glasses, where I've done a preview of the game tomorrow. The State of Scottish Football team will be back live on YouTube between 6 and 7 tomorrow night, previewing the rest of the Scottish football card and maybe more transfer news that have come out over the last 24 hours. So if you have enjoyed the show tonight, remember to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you're notified when we are live between 6 and 7 on midweeks, reviewing and previewing all the events across Scottish football. But Struan, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope we've not cursed a few players there and a few transfers. I've not jinxed anything tonight, I hope. Touch wood.
Yeah, fingers crossed indeed. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening.